Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. I should say happy Memorial Day for everyone in that part of the world. My name is Matthew. I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio in Toronto, where there is no Memorial Day. We had Victoria Day last Monday, as mentioned. But as always, I'm joined by across the continent, across the border, where there is Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day, Joel. And how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. It's kind of nice to kind of have another kind of be back to the more quiet episodes now that we sort of finished the Andor extravaganza.
Yeah. I guess you don't say Happy Memorial Day. It's more of a have a good Memorial Day. We have Remembrance Day, same as Veterans Day, so on November. But yeah, yes, definitely good to keep going. I mean, we're definitely going to bring up Andor still because I'm about to quote Andor right now. Or I'm going to quote Mon Mothma specifically. This chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Ghorman Plaza. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about the Galactic Senate, what had been a shining beacon of inclusive representative democracy for millennia, had in just a century or so plummeted into a mouthpiece for authoritarianism. And Mon Mothma herself witnessed the decline in real time as the forum for truthful speech and good faith debate was now a theater for loyalty to Palpatine. So yes, this week we look at the fall of the republics and the empire's corruption-infested legislature. It's another reminder that both of us have poli-sci degrees. There we go. Hello from New Zealand, where there also is no Memorial Day, but there we go. Also with a parliamentary Westminster legislature, I imagine. So there we go.
Yes.
Among other things.
Good old Britain parliamentary Westminster legislature.
The king is actually here. The king is actually, by the way, the king is here to. This is very, very nerdy of me to give the throne speech, which the crown, the monarch, has not actually given the throne speech in Canada since Queen Elizabeth did it, maybe in the 60s or 70s, I think. So
I know there was some controversy around that because for ultra royalist side of the political aisle, they want the good old days back.
Well, no, I mean, it was a big get from Mark Carney, who's a moderate, very much a moderate, and saying, hey, get the crown here. It was also a matter of saying, hey, our head of state is also a privileged rich man, but he has no power, so that's good. There we go. Speaking of legislatures, speaking of politics, we're already into it. We're already neck deep into it. We'll get the plugs out first. You can follow us mostly on Blue Sky. I'm going to just start saying most people follow us on Blue Sky at Ion Canon. Follow the flagship at the SWU, also on Blue Sky and Instagram and Twitter and anywhere else, and of course here on Underworld, Facebook, etc. If audio is more your speed, you can see down below. That's Instagram and Twitter as well, on Threads down below. If audio is more your speed, if you prefer to listen rather than watch, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search wrong podcast, Matthew. Ion Canon podcast. The Ion Canon podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. When we're done recording, I will pop this up onto there, and you'll have the episode good to go. Yes, of course, talking about the flagship, we are proudly part of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. And here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we have YouTube memberships, we have super chats, and if you chat with us, like we're being chatted with here, great. Got comments about Anzac Day. Oh yeah, Anzac Day. That's right. And you have two monarchies. Only one of them lives here. Yes. Aotearoa, it's pretty important there. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about more indigenous leaders, but also the governor general and all that stuff. Anyway, where was I talking about? Yeah, Underworld. Yes, so Underworld YouTube. So if you chat with us, as mentioned, we'll get to the comments as best we can, as soon as we can. If you super chat us, I will interrupt Joel mid-sentence. I'll interrupt myself mid-sentence to get to it. To your comment, or as fast as humanly possible, I should say. Also, YouTube memberships here on the channel. We're grateful for any support you are willing and able to provide. Perhaps most importantly is the Star Wars Underworld Discord server, which is a wonderful place for discussion, for commentary, for all sorts of fun fandom. I shared a few memes in there. every now and then. Even just yesterday in the Venn diagram, the sports channel, I shared something fun that I thought was like a High Republic reference, but it was about the Carolina Hurricanes. So,
Right.
it was funny. No, it was funny. It was funny. I'm proud of that. But yeah, check that out. Check out the Discord. Link in the description down below. And speaking of the Discord, Joel, what is going on in the Discord this week, if anything?
This week, I think we will continue our game nights. We have been trying to squeeze as much game night as possible as Star Wars Fortnite has its like final week. This is definitely we're entering the last few days, last few weeks. And then probably after Fortnite's done, we might go back to switching between movies and game nights for the Discord.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, Fortnite's just already been big in that community, for a while now, for a few years, and of course it's a Star Wars thing. So Star Wars Fortnite having its heyday, you're definitely just gonna show it some love. So yeah, check that out. Go ahead and click on the link in the description below. Last but not least, I did mention the other podcast I do, Tractor Beam Comics Reviews. Wednesdays are for comics are for Wednesdays. This week we'll finally have caught up fully from all the delays because of Celebration and just shifting everything around. So yeah, we were talking about Legacy of Vader #4 and Rise of Skywalker #4, and our resident sequelist, Mr. Joel Davis, will join us. You're over there. We'll join Chris Abbott and myself. That is right here on the Underworld YouTube channel at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday night. Yeah, we're having an all sequel era show coming on there because Legacy of Vader is a Kylo Ren comic book. It's definitely it's bridging the prequel era and the sequel era, and so it's definitely great for you to Joel, you to come on and chat about that with us. Charles will doing its thing. Just get that comment up there. Just again, interesting past anything. Yeah, just different, indigenous rulers, indigenous leaders in New Zealand. That's very important information and very interesting that doing, having that kind of system of government and different layers of government there. So you learn something new every day. Learn something about different parts of this real world. Let's talk about Star Wars and get full on nerdy. Joel, what is your week in Star Wars?
My week in Star Wars is based off a meme, which I think we forgot to put on our thing.
Nope, I found it.
We can't see. Unfortunately, we can't see the whole thing.
There we go.
Or can we? Oh, we can. Yay! I can control it.
So
it's a silly little meme of look at all the ancient Siths being all uber powerful, like they could suck the life out of people, and then Palpatine, a politician. Silly. You
got to read them all out. Just read them out.
Okay, I'll read them out. Okay, I got to read them out. Scion, powerful enough in the Force, he literally could not die unless he was willing. Held his battle-worn body together with the Force. Nihilus had to sap Force energy to sustain his life. Eventually became a living Force spirit attached to his mask and fed on entire planets. Darth Bane, best duelist in history, could create air pocket in the rain with only his saber. Created the rule of 2. Sidious. What a politician. Okay. I know.
It's so great.
I know. It's funny. Yes, I know. A politician is the most deathly power at all. But this silly power scaling meme thing actually kind of got me thinking. So I've been on a Lord of the Rings Tolkien kick for a couple of days now.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I just out of the blue. And I was thinking about how something that's very thematic about Tolkien's whole history of Middle Earth, the Legendarium, as its completed work is called. It's the idea of perpetual decline and how everything is a shadow or a faded version of something before. So Gondor, even in its splendor, is still but a pale imitation of Numenor. Numenor is still a pale imitation of the lands of the First Age, Beleriand. Sauron is a pale imitation of Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, and even Saruman and try to be a pale imitation of Sauron. So you can kind of tell every version of the same kind of thing is kind of lesser and lesser and lesser. It's like
Right.
for its time, it's scary, but then it's like when you compare Sauron to Morgoth, it's like, oh shit, Morgoth is way too more terrifying. And I've always wondered, as Star Wars wants to kind of dip its toe back into the past, with both ancient Sith and ancient Jedi and ancient civilizations, of are we going to see that? Are the Jedi and Sith, even the best of their time, still just pale imitations of the past? Are the Siths are the first ancient Siths like even like were they could do such specific and grander things that when you compare them to Palpatine and all the dark things he could do, it's like, oh, Palpatine, you're just a pale imitation of what these guys used to do. And you kind of see it a little bit with like how even Plagueis probably had better skills and maybe was a bit more of a scarier individual than even Palpatine would become in his time. I mean, they're the reason why Plagueis was the master. After all, someone's got to teach Palpatine the ropes. And it's sort of this idea of like this perpetual decline that Tolkien always was very, very big on. How even things in their splendor are still at the lust and wonder of the ancient past. I don't know. I just it's funny how this is silly meme that's probably meant to be more about look how power scaling and stuff is actually got me thinking of stuff that's really deep and mythological. And if that would ever be a direction Star Wars would ever go in, especially if we one day decide to cover the Old Republic and the before the Old Republic and what everything was like, with everything more mystical and grand and bombastic, and what we see in Star Wars, even in the prequels and even the High Republic, is still pale imitations of those beautiful moments. But I don't know. That's just my random thought of this week. All from a silly meme. Ain't it something? If you want to put the meme down, that's
no,
fine.
I want to keep it up because you want to throw that through. Yeah, it's true. I want to keep this up just because it triggered some of my thoughts. But first of all, to say, it's different genres, so different. Different kinds of stories that they're trying to tell, right? I mean, we have these kind of high fantasy sort of dark side users, right? The kind of thing from high fantasy just in space, and that's why Star Wars is a space fantasy. And then you have, but we know Palpatine. I mean, you see him shooting the lightning there. He could do all that. You could probably learn to do all that stuff, right?
Unless that knowledge got lost for some reason.
Knowledge got lost, but they could figure things out. I mean, there was the whole bit just before Sidious about I mean, it's these 10 legends. You mentioned Plagueis. He tried to manipulate the midi-chlorians to keep this venomous dude alive. That's pretty weird. That's pretty out there. And Sidious promised his next his last apprentice, Darth Vader, to how's it going? To man, I forgot to change the background. Anyway, I'm gonna do something. Go others. Sidious promised Vader, we're gonna teach you to do that. I'm gonna teach you to do that. We're gonna learn together how to do that. Oh wait, I don't really know how to do that. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to keep Padme alive. I want to just hold Padme in front of you, so you keep this carrot, so you keep chasing her. But they probably could have done that. That being said, what we have this slide up here created the rule of two. So before the rule of two, Sith can just be out in the open doing their nonsense, doing whatever, all this weird stuff. We have some vestige of that with, say, the Acolytes of the Beyond and their fixation with masks, for example, right? We see that in the Aftermath trilogy. We see that in Shadow of the Sith. That whole fixation there. There is some weird Sith gobbledygook. It's just, you're right. It's not the main. The point of this is that their main characteristic, their main use of power is very different. But again, because it's after the rule of two. After the rule of two, they have to go into hiding. They have to do other things and use other sorts of power. So Plagueis, to continue this meme, say he's a banker.
Yeah, that's so true.
Was-
A banker, the
the
truest
money
of evil.
guy, and then Sidious was a politician, and then Vader was a pit bull. And yeah, I mean, and both Sidious and Tyrannus were politicians, right? That's
It's true.
that's interesting. That might come up a bit later in our conversation. I don't know if it will, but yeah, it's both funny and an interesting thought. Then is okay, what kind of story will James Mangold and others want to start telling about? Yeah, going like you said, going back. That's really whether or not we'll see. I mean, I know it's a real world concern, but whether or not we'll see how that lore is developed to serve the story and serve characters, the story they want to tell. Because I mean, Sidious being a politician, that is the story that George was telling, especially in the prequels, right?
Oh yeah.
That's where we see it, and that just serves the story. If it served the story for him to be like this duelist who could do all gobbledygook and whatever and create an air pocket and all that.
Palpatine was a pretty good duelist, from what I've always.
Yeah, and so was Tyrannus, right? Tyrannus
Yeah.
was actually probably a better duelist.
No problem.
Count Dooku. I mean, even when he was Master Dooku, it was a great duelist. But yeah, that'll depend. I mean, I think in terms of audiences, though, I think something like a politician. I mean, this is why the prequels have probably aged so well. One of the reasons is that being a politician, that's a more relatable villain. Now that I think about it, then I mean, these are cool, right?
Oh yeah.
Using the mask and everything like that. That stuff's cool, but I think a wider audience will gravitate towards the kinds of evil that we feel more palpably in the real world. And that's the thing, is all these other things, they need to be allegories of evil and symbols and images of evil and darkness and selfishness and greed. Well, why not just make him a politician or a banker, right? So I get that. I don't know if you have anything to respond, though.
I mean, Markion Ro's not a politician. He's a kind of a
True.
pirate. Kind of a
True,
weird-
or pirates, but that's the thing. Pirates more sympathetic. Okay.
Unless you're Markion. I don't find Markion sympathetic. I find him just crazy.
Yeah. Like an unhinged. Yeah. And he's a
Markion
great
actually
villain, too.
reminds me of a lot of the old school Siths. It's
Mhm.
like just pillage and burn, and
Yeah.
except he doesn't do shoot sports lightning. So I mean, hey, they can do it with Markion, But yeah, I will one day be curious. It's like
Mhm.
if we go to pre-rule of two Siths, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
What
I
are
mean,
they
the thing about Markion is, or the High Republic is, I mean, the Nihil come from a sect that is decidedly anti-force. You don't use the force. The force will be free, as his great grandma preached, right? Whereas the force users are only the good guys in the High Republic, which is an interesting change, an interesting difference especially from the Skywalker saga, where you have Vader and you have Sidious and Tyrannus and you have Kylo Ren. So yeah, interesting difference. So yeah, which option do they go? Do they go somewhere in between? We will wait and see with Old Republic and Ancient Republic. There you go. And do you have any further thoughts on this one before I get to my 3 weeks in
Nope.
Star Wars? All right.
Bye. Just think it's fun.
There we go. So I got 3 thoughts, which is unusual because we were saving them up, I guess. But the things that just came out last week. The first thing to say, I had the privilege. A friend of mine gave me a ticket to go see Empire Strikes Back in concert, Toronto Symphony Orchestra at Roy Thompson Hall. And this is the 3rd time I've seen one of these. I saw Return of the Jedi and I saw The Last Jedi. And it's just so immersive. I think it's one of the, if you can get to doing it once in your life, I recommend it, because I mean, first of all, I also have a music degree, so I can kind of understand what's happening, but you really feel your instruments, you really feel the orchestra coming at you, you feel the music physically, literally, and not just metaphorically, not just emotionally, but also physically, it's right. They're literally there, and it's a big concert hall, but they're literally physically there, and you feel the sound waves coming at you, and from the actual physical. It was incredibly immersive experience, and you really notice a lot of things about the score that you may not have noticed before. Just different use of themes. Of course, that's Empire Strikes Back. So the conductor at the beginning, he was mentioning Empire is what when John Williams wrote the Imperial March, wrote Lando's theme, or Chewie's theme, right? The Imperial March doesn't show up in A New Hope, in case you're wondering. But yeah, it was written for Empire Strikes Back, and so which is one of the great all-time great film themes of all time. So that was a really incredible immersive experience. In such a large crowd where people are cheering and whatever, and even at some points, they had subtitles because at some points the dialogue track is not loud enough, which is great. I'm like, okay, I don't need to hear the dialogue in this case. Like, I don't hear Lando and Leia walking around Cloud City. I just want to listen to music.
Right.
And so and notice those cues, and yeah, it was really fantastic. And yeah, just it's Empire Strikes Back, right? It's a really vibrant, refreshing way of you watching it in a new way, in a new angle.
Have they done this at least for all of the movies, or just those ones so far?
I haven't seen them do the prequels.
That'd be
you know how I
interesting
feel
to do
about
Phantom
that.
Menace and Episode 3, because you need like a choir. You wouldn't.
That's true. Yeah. Well, there's ways around it. Like they can have the choir be part of the recording, possibly. And well, that would be amazing to actually have.
And Battle of Heroes, they need that for Battle of Heroes too.
Yeah, have the choir. That'll be something else. But yeah, I mean, there's ways around it. Like, because I mean, all the sound effects were also, of course, part of this track. It didn't have anyone doing Foley right there. It was pretty interesting. But yeah, they've definitely done it for. I know they did it for Force Awakens. I know they've done it obviously for all the originals. Yeah, I haven't seen them do it for the prequels, and I would rearrange my schedule for Revenge of the Sith. If they were doing Revenge of the Sith and I can only go on a Monday night, Joel, I would be there instead of here.
I mean, I'd be curious to see how they do it again. I want to see that one had like the choir and stuff.
Yeah,
so. I don't think the other films do.
Well, I mean, Phantom Menace for Duel of the Fates, right?
No, I mean, that's what I meant. The prequels have choir music.
Yeah, no. Well, Return of the Jedi has the.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, when I saw that, I think that was part of the track. Then the orchestra played the accompaniment. So that was again fantastic. I definitely recommend if you can ever go to one of those. They can be pricey because orchestras need the support these days. I mean, arts funding. Even here in Canada, we don't have the arts funding that it should have, and orchestras are big, and they need support and finances and whatnot. Speaking of seeing films in a different way, I finally got around to watching Rogue One last night after watching Andor, and there's something I definitely wanted to do. I knew going in there would be some things that I'd realize, oh, that's different, that's interesting. I mean, seeing what Cassian's been through to get to where he is, to get to be the type of person he is, we see in Rogue One. The fact even that we know now that Galen was a good guy, was actually going for helping save the rebellion and save the galaxy. After when I watched the finale of Andor, I realized, all Cassian knows is he's an Imperial engineer making the super weapon.
Right.
Sure, he's going to take him out if he has to, or capture him or whatnot. Even though he could also be good evidence for testimony, but not the whole thing. Well, this gets to another big chain evidence for testimony, but seeing Andor being all about, is he going to go the Luthen route or the Mon Mothma route, right? Luthen being you kill off sources, leaks to plug them. Whereas Mon Mothma, well, no, you try and use them for evidence. You try and incorporate them into a family. It's part of this organized rebellion that we, of course, see on Yavin as well. And so just thinking again about that moment on Edu where he has Galen in his sights, and he says, he's about to pull the trigger, and he pulls away to have that kind of character arc. I mean, that's the moment, just like for Mon Mothma was leading to Secret Cargo, for Cassian was really, I mean, it's leading to, of course, Scarif, but also leading to this moment on Edu, character-wise, his full commitment to really what the rebellion stands for, which is the flourishing of life and this protection of life and freedom, and not just pulling a Luthen, doing an extrajudicial killing, right? An assassination, which they've done, and the rebellion does do that, but with good reason or not, like that didn't seem the best reason. The thing I think that actually, here's the irony of it all, though, is having seen, especially season 2, especially the last 2 arcs, the thing that I think Luthen's thinking about when he's seeing Galen on that platform, he's seeing
Could be Andor thinking about.
Yeah, Cassian's thinking about this. He's seeing Galen on that platform. He's seeing Krennic come and basically kill Galen's entire team. He's seeing that Galen is willing to die to pass along this information, and he's putting Bodhi at risk, putting himself at risk. He's willing to die to pass on this information about his secret, about the existence of the Death Star, but also the flaw that he made. And of course, at that point, Jin's already seen the message. Jin's relayed the message, but Cassian doesn't know whether or not to believe it. And his orders are to shoot. But just how Luthen was willing to die, Clea was willing to kill him, had to kill him in order to protect everything. Cassian sees Galen willing to die as well, and that, I think, is what gives him pause and says, "Oh, this must be real. There must be something real to this. I'm gonna do what I can to keep him alive." Of course, he dies anyway because the rebellion. Apparently, they're already engaged. I never understood that part, but I mean that for Jin's own story to carry it forward, and just the unlikelihood. And this is the last point I think that stands out: the unlikelihood of the rebels accepting Jin's message, and all the hunches and all the vibes that they have to go on because they don't have hard evidence until they send the message up through the shield gate, or no, not through the shield, like up through the antenna, and they actually get the plans, and then they study the plans, and then Luke takes the plans and throws and uses them, right? But all those things. So I mean, and just having in mind, the Force healer, and how, again, this is not a harshly, strictly materialist universe. There is a force that does move, and we see Cassian being skeptical about it, but we see Chirrut especially be faithful about it, hopeful about the force, believing, sensitive to it in a way that says, okay, it is guiding things. And so, yeah, to see, I mean, what she says about what the Force healer says about him having a destiny as a messenger. Well, I mean, of course, and that's obviously, we know what that means, right? We knew that meant the message about the Death Star plans and whatnot. But yeah, it really just, it doesn't change the film at all. It doesn't, or wholesale. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it opens up what might be happening in those key moments. And yeah, I mean, Jin's still the main character of this film, right? But it gives the show, lends Cassian a lot more richness and depth that Diego Luna had portrayed already. Did a great job when he was playing in the film, but this gives us a sense of again, what he's been through and what could lead him to be the person who is also willing then to sacrifice himself. And so, yeah, it definitely aids. It's like what we say with the paper to screen pipeline. It hits different when we see it. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Rogue One after Andor. I don't know if you have
Nice.
any thoughts there.
I think the rebels engage because Draven's not sure if Cassian's going to be able to do it, so I think he just decides send a squad, just blow up.
Yeah, no, I get that, but they haven't taken a shot yet. They can just pull up.
No, I think by then it's like they have. I think by then they can't get the They can't contact the commander before it's too late.
Oh, I know. I've always thought that was odd because they can send a message. I don't know.
I think it was too late by then. It's like timing.
All right, whatever. Last thought, very quickly, shifting gears, going back in time. This is a very Joel-esque thought about the Guardian program. Maybe I'll flesh this out next week again, but just the thought about the Guardian protocols. Of course, in Shadow of Starlight, the comic book by Charles Soule, that bridges phases 1 and 3, the High Republic. We learned the Guardian protocols have been instituted. We learn about the Guardian protocols, and that this thing's about more stricter organization discipline for the Jedi. That even knights have to be, their missions have to be approved, and they have to go in pairs and whatnot. So I'm wondering, were they abrogated and then reinstated for the Clone Wars? Or were they just made permanent after the High Republic? I mean, we might find out in Trails of the Jedi, but I suspect they were abrogated and then reinstated for the Clone Wars. But I'd like to see a story that goes into that.
Oh, actually, there is one. If you ever read Rise of the Red Blade, I think the Guardian protocols are mentioned again.
Oh, interesting. I'll look that up then. But yeah, like if is it a mention of have they been abrogated, or because that would have been the first mention then?
I don't know if they've been mentioned, but been abrogated, but I definitely think that the character who becomes an Inquisitor gets a quick promotion because of the Clone Wars, and Knights become Masters, Padawans become Knights. I think that's how Anakin becomes a Knight so quickly as well. I think I might be making stuff up. But I do know that whole. That's how Jedi got so promoted so quickly, get mentioned, and how, and then there was like a thing of like Knights are like are generals and Padawans are colonels in the army now. So go read
commanders or whatever
by Delilah S. Dawson. I swear they mentioned that.
I definitely need to read that one. That's for sure. But I'll look that up. We have a question. We done discussion on Revenge of the Sith. I mean, we did this week. We talked about it. We haven't done a full-on episode about it, but we should. It's my favorite
novelization.
Yeah, it's true. We'll do the novelization when we get it, and when it comes in the special edition. It's the greatest film of all time. So yes, we will. Could add one thing to Revenge of the Sith. Either from Legend. Well, this is an interesting question.
If you could add one thing from Revenge of the Sith, what would you want to add? I
have my answer.
Maybe an Ahsoka mention. That'd be interesting. Kind of retroactively go back and put her in there.
I'd add the Loyalist Committee and everything about the coalition and all that. I mean, Alexander Freed effectively confirmed it, but in Mask of Fear. But yeah, I'd put those scenes in. Maybe or find a. I mean, I'm no editor, I'm no story writer, but find a way to make it flow because.
It's funny that George Lucas was actually like, nah, these don't work. This isn't what I want. So that's why he took it out.
I mean, I suspect it had a lot to do with flow. Right.
Yeah. And focus. And focus.
Yeah. But or to make it more integrated into the story then somehow. Just because, I mean, it adds so much to Padme. It would have been the Mon Mothma's shining moment, which we got anyway, but we had to wait until April 2025, the Mon Mothma's shining moment. So, or it's May 2025 to get Mon Mothma's shining moment. But yeah, that'll be it. Yeah, Ahsoka mentioned, yeah, that'll be interesting too. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, we can do that. Great question. Keep them rolling. I like that. Look for those questions. There we go.
But yeah,
So-
I'll just say,
Mhm.
my gut tells me they might have been abrogated because
Yeah.
again, the Jedi don't decline. I mean, the Jedi do decline. It's like it took
Mhm.
what, a couple hundred years. Like they're still around for a couple hundred more years after High Republic. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, sure, but sorry, I forgot to make this banner.
oh, that's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. They might have declined faster. Yeah, if I mean, here's got a comment about this. The Five-Reverse Legion attacked the Jedi Temple. Dooku talking to Palpatine. I mean, like stuff from the novelization, right? Like the stuff before the first scene there.
I mean, the novel is basically just a different draft of the movie.
Yeah,
It really is when you read it. It's like,
yeah.
this is a different movie.
And I guess you mean the attack of the temple, meaning just a more extended scene of that. Because we do get it, right? But we just get a little snippet of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
The game has a whole level. And you killed
so
Jocasta Nu, so that wouldn't work anymore. But
yeah, there we go. All right, great question. Again, great question. All right, let's dive in. Maybe I'll think about more about this whole guardian protocols and flesh that thought out a little more for next week. But yeah, maybe that'll be part of the main topic too. Who knows? We'll see. But all right, the fall of the Senate, our main topic. And I just want to set this up a little bit. Because the first time we hear of the Senate in Star Wars media, it was 48 years ago yesterday. A little indie film called Star Wars, or the Star Wars that name subsequently changed to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. That's the first time we hear of the Senate. Very early in the film, Tarkin, and he's announced to officials that gathered on the Death Star that the Emperor has dissolved the council permanently. Here's my accent. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away. So that we've seen past
the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy.
Yes. All that. Which is interesting. I mean, we just saw a show about the decline of the Senate, and not about the decline, but featuring the decline of the Senate, and then it's also about the Death Star, a show about the Death Star. So anyway, the trajectory, my point being, the trajectory has always been one of decline and then dissolution, dissolved. Even if for a while, all we knew was the end of that process. All we knew was that was a Senate, but that was the trajectory. That was where it was heading, right? But then seeing it happen first through the prequels and then the Clone Wars, and then we even get the before image of the High Republic, and of course, as I mentioned in Andor, makes it all the more tragic. And it's really been an avenue for storytellers to express what is wrong, frankly, about a lot of politics today, possibly dysfunctional about legislatures in particular. So we're going to dive in a lot of some real world political science, some real world stuff, and some in-universe stuff. But I've talked plenty, Joel. I'll let you take it away.
Right. All right. The Senate. Now, the Senate, I think, is one of the more weirder aspects of Star Wars in a strange sense. Because I think there's the mythological side of Star Wars, and then there's people who definitely like projecting the real world of Star Wars. And both are not wrong. But I do think that the Senate is an interesting kind of a mixture nomenclature kind of thing. Using big words here. Because when I hear the word Senate, I think of the upper house of the U.S. Chamber of Congress. That's what I think of. Because I'm American. A lot of countries actually don't have senates. Most people are unicameral systems, and if they do, their senates aren't that important. Compared to ours, which is weird and archaic.
Sure.
But much like our weird and archaic system, it does come from somewhere. It didn't just poof it out of our butts. I do. This is where I think George isn't looking to just the U.S. Chamber of Congress. Okay, Chamber of Commerce. He's obviously looking to Rome, the Roman Senate. This is
Yeah.
where the Empire and Rome kind of definitely have their the all powerful Senate that governed the Republic for thousands of years, um,
Mhm.
tens of thousands of years, depending on how far back the Senate actually goes. Um, Depending on how many iterations of the Senate there have been /
Mhm.
iterations of the Republic. Um, so there's that. Also, the Senate is weird because it's also kind of a United Nations or European Parliament kind of situation where
Mhm.
it's all these planets have different types of local governments. Some are republics, some are democratic monarchies, some are just full on royal bloodline monarchy, like Alderaan. It's great. Some are autocracies, apparently. I'm sure somewhere.
Mhm.
Some books they really
Mhm.
went further with the republic and just lets in any military dictator as long as they're okay with the republic, they get a senator. Um, and because of that, you got the Senate is this weird mix of the United Nations, the Roman Senate, and I'm sure you're probably thinking of our Senate too, obviously.
Mhm.
And because of that, I think it makes for a very weird hodgepodge of it's kind of like this, but it's also like that. And
Mhm.
again, I think it's just it's all kind of allegorical. George's kind of way to vent his frustrations. I think we weren't really meant to go any deeper than just the Senate. It was once this great body that used to do stuff, and then it got corrupt, and then Palpatine used that corruption to manipulate it, as was stated in the New Hope novelization,
Mhm.
where the Senate governed the galaxy wisely for thousands of years. Um, but I get the question I'll just ask to you, Matthew, is what is the Senate?
Yeah.
It's like the Senate again. Like I said, the Senate's this weird thing. So what is it? What is the Senate?
So
And
the
it's not
Senate.
Palpatine.
Oh, I was gonna make that joke. I was about to make. I'm gonna
Ah,
do it anyway. So the Senate was born on Naboo at something something BBY.
ah, ha, ha, ha,
Wah,
ha.
wah, wah. The Senate is what is the Senate?
What is the
Yeah, I
Senate?
mean, it's a symbol of an august body of
Until
squabbling.
Augustus comes along.
Yes, till Augustus comes along. Well, that's probably where the word august. Well, no, probably not. Auguri. Um, I mean it for a while. I mean, it was the government. It was the source of sovereignty in the republic. Um, there's a reason. There's a reason even in the return in Revenge of the Sith, they say the Senate will decide your fate. Go through the Senate. There was they don't really go into detail about um the relationship between executive and legislative. I almost wonder if there's something more parliamentary in there going on. Probably not.
I
I
have an
mean, we would.
answer to that, actually.
Well, yeah. I mean, they don't identify like prime minister and then the minister of trade is a senator. They don't say that, but uh, there seems to be some sort of kind of when you think of the government of the republic. So when you think of here's the thing: when you think of the government of the United States, when you use the word government, what you're referring to is all three branches kind of together.
Mhm.
And that's why it's so messed up, because all three branches are supposed to check and balance each other. And then when one decides, no, I don't want to listen to the Supreme Court, then I can do what I want. And then the Supreme Court says, oh, hold on a minute. When someone in the executive branch tells the legislative branch, I don't know what habeas corpus is, then there's that. Whereas, when we talk about the government of Canada, we mean something more specific, right? Or the government of New Zealand. What we mean is specifically, we mean the Liberal caucus right now. We mean the prime minister and the cabinet specifically. And then, but of course, the cabinet, almost all of them, not all of them. I think there are some senators in cabinet, can be in cabinet, but by and large, they're all members of parliament. They're all elected MPs, part of the legislature. So, I mean, that's the interesting thing. It seems to have kind of this, I mean, maybe it's kind of almost Praetorian in maybe the Roman system, which I don't quite grasp, but
I don't think
you know,
anyone grasped the Roman system. I don't think
yeah.
the Roman grasped it.
That's true. Yeah, like what is the Senate? I mean, it depends on when and for who. Like for Mon Mothma, it is the place to try and make the galaxy a better place. For Padme, for Bail Organa, that's clearly what it is.
Mhm.
For Palpatine, it's a vehicle for the Sith to rule the galaxy once again. For Tia Toon, this is interesting. In the High Republic, it's a place where civilian kind of, I mean, just even for civilian defense and civilian rule to counterbalance the importance of the Jedi and the power of the Jedi. There, he doesn't disrespect the Jedi, but he doesn't think they should be calling all the shots, especially when it comes to planetary security. And I gather for him that trickles down to other things as well. It is the legislature, technically speaking, but it is, I mean, the difference, say, maybe this is why it feels like it's a bit more parliamentary slightly, is because you see the chancellor addressing the Senate in a normal session and even chairing it to some extent at some points to try and get I mean, probably legislation, probably Valorum has legislation he's trying to get through. So he's chairing this meeting and setting the agenda and all that. Masamida is able to do that on Palpatine's behalf. That's an interesting thing. You don't normally see Palpatine chairing a session of the Republic Senate.
You do. You see that all the time in Clone Wars. He's always there.
Yeah, okay, maybe in Clone Wars.
By the time of the Empire, he's like, I got better things to do. I got
maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
I got
well, actually, you know what? Maybe that's a great point. That's a sign of the decline, because, I mean, if you're the executive, that's the thing about question period, right? That's the thing about. It's not so much the throne speech or the State of the Union, but the thing about being, a parliamentary system, if the executive is in the legislature, then they're accountable to the legislature, right? That's
supposedly, that's the hope.
Well, but it's more than the hope, right? I mean, the fact that they have to have the confidence of the legislature. That's how a parliamentary system works. And so when Valorum is there, he has the confidence of the legislature until Padme says vote of no confidence in Valorum's leadership and Queen Amidala, and then he loses the confidence of it, and then they elect the chancellor. So yeah, it's this interesting. Again, maybe you think maybe you have a source that says it's a bit more defined, the relationship between executive and legislative, but it seems like the stories themselves haven't needed it. I'd be fascinated by it, but
well,
yeah.
I've always gotten the sense, and this is also true of both the American government as well, that the idea is always supposed to be the legislature is supreme.
Yeah,
like the executive is not supposed to be powerful. They're just kind of a functionary, and then they kind of just keep the trains running. Like the legislature is supposed to always be the grand political body of. It's to say, like that's what we're like in France, with the French Revolution, with the convention, with what the Soviet Union is supposed to be, with the Soviets, the Grand Council of the Soviets. And even in America, the idea was always supposed to be the legislature is supposed to be the all powerful. Like the courts and the presidency isn't actually supposed to be that powerful. It's actually supposed to be legislature that's supposed to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that with George, going back to the 70s, I don't know, not even the 70s, going back really, honestly, American government's the legislature's been slowly giving up its power for decades, centuries, even.
Yeah.
Like everyone who says like, "Oh, Trump is like destroying norms," like not really. Everything he can do is technically legal. A lot of it's legal.
Right.
It's been Congress has given up these powers for years, going back to Woodrow Wilson, probably.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court has shifted. I mean, that's in case law as well, right? The Supreme Court is.
I mean, that's another thing. The court's actually been exercising too much power. they've been overstepping for decades.
Sure.
Like all the progressive civil rights stuff that came through the courts.
Mhm.
In hindsight, that's actually not really a good thing because it's like if you can't legislate this stuff,
Mhm.
then it's just basically like 5 people saying, "Hey, civil rights is a good thing," which is nice, but
Yeah.
there's something kind of wrong about. I'm going to sound so terrible. I don't care. I'm kind of wrong with like the grand legislature, which is supposed to be the elected representatives of the people, can't legislate that people of color can have equal rights as everybody else,
Right.
and the court has to kind of do that. That's not good for long term progress, people.
Yeah.
So I always felt that, and even in parliamentary systems,
Mhm.
more and more power has gone into the executive.
Yeah.
Like the Prime Minister of Canada, or like this is kind of maybe a bit of a hot take, and probably it's not true, but I'm sure probably some countries make me feel this way. The Prime Minister in parliamentary systems can basically be a dictator if they really want to. I mean, they got the legislature on their side. As long as they keep the
Yeah.
party and the incentives of their party and they got a majority, like they can really pass any law without really
Yeah.
any opposition.
Which
Here's
the irony of that. That's what it was designed for, right? It was designed to have, like, I mean, the way it developed especially in Westminster, was to have this strong executive
Mhm.
to be able to, I mean, to be able to originally to push through what the crown wanted, but
Mhm.
ultimately to push through, what the majority wanted. And then, but that's, I mean, so although, that also depends on how likely is it to have a coalition, and that has to do with the electoral system. And then we
That's
get
true.
into all that. So,
That's true.
but yeah,
Hit
and
our
then
fellow
parliamentary,
parliamentarian friend.
yeah. So I
Parliamentarian.
mean, that's again the Westminster system, right?
Right.
Um,
But to go
as
back to
yeah,
with Star Wars, I think
mhm,
Star Wars is like a weird kind of
yeah,
hybrid of the American and the Westminster because the
mhm,
chancellors are elected by the Senate and not the people. Although
mhm,
technically now they're our president, they're elected by the Electoral College, which is
yeah.
a whole other thing.
The Senate becomes an electoral college, right?
In a sense, yeah, it's the electoral. It'd be like if the Electoral College and the Senate and Congress were the same thing.
Yeah,
But they're
which it
kind
can be in a tie or whatever, right? Or some of the situations.
It's very archaic and confusing. If you
Yeah.
ever really look up American government, you realize we are very messed up.
Mhm.
Like just on our paper, it's like, wait, what? Like our election laws
Yeah.
are run by the states. We have no
Yeah,
national
that's another
election,
weird thing. Yeah.
which is kind of a good thing right now
Mhm.
because that means like they could be like hard to cancel an election, but that's a whole other story.
Sure.
But it just makes it more confusing. We're a very federal government in the biggest sense of like our states have a lot of power still. Um, but the point is, um, I think even in Star Wars,
Mhm.
and Legends kind of makes it more of a back and forth depending on the era, but at least for now, I think the idea has always been the chancellor isn't really the chancellorship is not really supposed to be that powerful. It's actually kind
Yeah.
of they're kind of more just the Senate chairman in a sense. They're not really
Mhm.
supposed to be that powerful. I mean, that's definitely what Mothma was trying to go back to when she became the chancellor, and she wanted just to have a very almost non-existent executive
Yeah.
where all decisions are made within the legislature. And of course, what George was trying to say with Palpatine, obviously going back to Nixon. Although to be fair, this goes back decades. Nixon's kind of the epitome of that era,
Mhm.
and never went away of
Epiphany?
of the imperial presidency, and the
Mhm.
legislature just deciding to give up more and more and more of its powers
Yeah.
for whatever reason into the hands of a all-powerful executive branch, an individual.
He promised safety, security, and loads of dollars.
Well,
Loads of credits.
that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what going back to FDR, even
Yep.
right, like you know, give FDR the power to do
Mhm.
all this stuff and save the
Yeah.
world. And that never went away. Then when Obama didn't go away with Biden, just more and more the executive, like
Mhm.
the executive in modern America probably does more than what the Constitution actually says it's supposed to.
Yeah.
But our government has changed over the last 200 years, just has never been codified. So to go back to
Mhm.
Star Wars,
Yeah.
I guess the question of the fall of the Senate is, um, And this is actually something, if I could make a small, if I could kind of always wanted to kind of, if I could like rewrite the story just a little bit.
Yeah.
I've always wanted a more gradual, more and more chancellors becoming more and more powerful, and Palpatine's just kind of the pinnacle of that. But I guess the question is, when did the Senate stop taking its duties seriously? I wouldn't duties
No,
seriously.
yeah.
You know, and stop really kind of, I guess, functioning is a kind of question. Like, when did it decide, like, we don't want to take responsibility, make hard choices. Let somebody else do that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of an interesting question. But I'll pass it on to you. I've been rambling.
Yeah, I mean that's the question, at least kind of been thinking, when when did it go from being this place where real discussion, real change could happen, real decisions could be taken, and to, like we said, we see the debate around the Ghorman massacre is this near human senator saying, "Oh, poor Imperials." This near human senator saying, "Oh, poor Imperials." This near human senator saying, "You better show your loyalty to the Emperor." But even then, before that, I mean, that is the thing. Yeah, I could see your point about there being maybe a stronger and stronger, a more gradual increase in the chancellor's
Like here in
power.
America, like here.
Right. Right. That'll be more realistic, I think, in some ways. But in other way, I mean, with Palpatine, it's a coup, right? It's this very rapid wartime shift in these 3 years to say, I'm going to just keep on amending the Constitution. We're going to keep amending the Constitution. I'm going to keep on gaining more and more power. And extending my reign, extending my term. Emergency measures and extending these emergency measures. And I mean, of course, we're understandably skittish about emergency measures. I mean, when COVID came up, Trudeau invoked our Emergency Measures Act, and people were not happy because emergency measure, right? Like that is a suspension of normal rights, which, I mean, oddly enough, I mean that's a good point about legislating those things versus adjudicating in the courts those things, but that's another conversation.
Don't get me wrong. I have supported the civil rights movement, all
of
the
course.
good stuff, but at the same time, it's like there's something that does. I don't know. It's like Roe v. Wade and all the contraception stuff being a court decision and not like a firmer hand legislative decision.
Right.
I mean, that came back to haunt us big time.
Yeah,
the court flipped.
So this is maybe going to get to where what my point is. My main point is, I mean, the reason Congress can't pass things like that, I mean, can't pass constitutional amendments like that, is because society is too divided on those things, right? The idea of a constitution is, I mean, this is the problem you see in the US right now, is the idea of a constitution is that this is the consensus in our society about how we're supposed to govern ourselves. That's the theory behind the Constitution. Whether it's written or unwritten, or in Canada we have a hybrid where some things are written, some things aren't, or some things are acts of Parliament. Is also another way of being an unwritten Constitution. Like in the UK, there's an unwritten Constitution that are also, there's constitutional acts that kind of point to what is constitutionally accepted. But yeah, I mean, society has to either agree to it, and that's the more enlightened view, or just not care enough. And the thing about these third rail things is that they've made these tribal identities about caring about things. They care so deeply, and that's the deeper problem. And so that's, again, what we see in the Republic, going back to Star Wars, is it's kind of the opposite of what we see in the US, right? It's, in a way, I mean, it's in the US, so it's not so much north south in the Senate, in the galactic, in the galaxy. It's I mean, it's all, the main division I mean, going back to the High Republic, even before, is center and periphery, right? It's literally called the core, and then the outer rim, and in between is the expansion region, the colonies and whatnot. But you notice, of course, that the core worlds, whether it's the late Republic or the Empire, you don't even, some people wouldn't even notice the difference. There's a different flag. Especially the wealthiest folks wouldn't notice the difference. I still can buy off the senator. Okay, so I still have to get in with this governor now. Oh no, they have a Death Star. That's what turns the tide. Is this Death Star was this dumb idea that we talked about before. That scares people off. But but the center periphery tension that said, we don't care about norms and about sharing power already. We don't care about sharing political power because we're already concerned with concentrating economic power. And so, if Palpatine is going to be our ticket to preserving the status quo, it's why the whole propaganda about the Ghormans worked so well, is because the Ghormans are a threat to our economic status quo, this proud outer rim world. How dare they? Even the Naboo, I think, to some extent. And then, don't get me started on Tatooine and whoever else, right? That's, of course, that's what Palpatine does intentionally, is to stoke, hey, Darth Tyrannus, I want you to go and lead this whole other breakaway secessionist movement, so we could create this crisis and these tensions. But that's the real decline of the Galactic Senate is in how it became. This is the story George is saying, how it becomes so tied to corporate interests in the core worlds that it came to accept increased concentration of power financially, and therefore accepting concentration of power politically. Of course, it ended up already stabbing them in the back too, because Palpatine just nationalized everything. And
he nationalized some things, actually. He kind of kept.
Sure, not everything. That's the thing. There's a lot of corporations that were still, well, at the very least, either nationalized everything, or because it was tyranny, said you conduct your business in the way we want, or else. Something like Sayonara, it kind of going along, it wasn't, and Tag Corp, right, was another one that kind of just, that not goes along, but said, there's an opportunity for profit. These are both weapons manufacturers, right?
Trade Federation got nationalized because nobody liked them.
So, well, that's just it. The Trade Federation got nationalized because they represented a block of economic power over against the core, by definition, right? That's another weird thing. I don't quite understand that because they have fleshed it out, but how Nemoidians in the Outer Rim, part of the secessionist movement, could also be the financial power in the galaxy. But maybe that's the problem, right? And that's this long-standing tension that, of course, builds up to the blockade of trade routes to this planet where Palpatine happens to be the senator. And so that part of it. So that kind of thing. It isn't that, I said that it's the opposite of what's happening with the US, in the sense it is and it isn't. It's the opposite in the sense that we've seen, yes, it's been gradual, but we've seen the greatest concentration of power supported by folks who felt so disaffected by the North. This is still bringing Civil War, North-South tensions here, but there's a reason there's a reason the South is so red, right? It's because they've constantly felt disaffected by folks in Washington, and even their state legislatures probably, and yet they believe in private enterprise. I saw this in Alberta, right? The folks, when I was in Alberta, when there was an NDP government, which is the Social Democratic Party, the one time there wasn't a conservative government in Alberta, because Alberta is the Texas of Canada. And I was living in a rural town of 6,000, and also in working there, and then also going to a village of 450. And of course, everyone they're all rural. They all know farmers or care about farmers, and that's important. They were so set against the government in Edmonton, the provincial government in Edmonton, but the oil companies in Calgary and the pharmaceutical corporations, and even the pharmacy, the actual pharmacy company chain, they were lauded as the do-gooders of society, and the government in Edmonton that wanted to actually build up society, they were the ones who were yeah, they were the ones who they were so skeptical of, and just couldn't stand, never even give a chance to. So it's it's this funny kind of opposite thing, in the sense that, I mean, maybe you could make an argument that there are elites. I mean, now it's the tech oligarchs, the tech bros supporting Trump, but by and large, big tech, big industry are part of big urban centers. They tend to be a bit more center left there. I mean, if anything, they're propping up the moderate Democrats who are ineffective against Trump, whereas they're also threatened by AOC and Bernie Sanders and them. So that's my sense of things. That's maybe where things connect more. My point, of course, being a legislature can only do, and that's the thing, the legislature is always the most democratic institution, because it can only do as much as society allows it, if legislatures have the power to do so. If they don't, then they're just talking points. I mean, the Russian parliament is entirely just an instrument for Putin to do what he wants, right?
Russia's already on paper had the strong executive, so it's like that's in the Constitution. Like,
yeah,
presidency's number one. That's
Yeah.
how we wrote. So at least they're honest. They're honest about what they are.
That's true.
Well, I mean, what did it say about society that's like okay with that? Like, I'm gonna be honest.
Exactly.
I bet you there's a lot of people who they'll never admit it, of course, who are like are Democrats and stuff, who are like, if we got like a Democrat dictator, we'd be kind of cool with it. Like like if Obama was all the things that the opposition said, like he's a dictator, blah blah blah, passing all these bills. I'm trust you. You wouldn't hear a beep from the people who accuse Trump of that, or at least a good chunk of them. Because I think we're just so done with. I think we're like, hey, it's our guy. He's a smart one.
Yeah. I mean, that's the tension on the left that may not really exist on the right. Maybe it should. Maybe it does in some parts. But, on the left, want a strong government to push through programs and regulate corporations, but also strongly believe in democratic norms and electoral reform and, popular voice. I think the way around that is to say they want a strong government to uphold the folks that don't have as much of a voice that they should. And then if enough people had the voice, then of course they'd prefer policies and governments that would support a more welfare society.
Well,
But
here's an
I do get your point, though. I do. I mean, it's related to your point about why the Supreme Court had to pass, have passed Brown versus Board of Education. Why the Supreme Court had to do all this? Why Kennedy had to go to the Supreme Court for interstate commerce, the Commerce Clause cases. Why it had to be the Commerce Clause, not an act of Congress making constitutional amendment, right? It was a Commerce Clause. I mean, that gets the whole trade federation thing, right? It's and for those who don't know what I'm talking about, that desegregation of businesses, just the limits placed on racial discrimination in the US. There wasn't some bill that says governments may not discriminate, or organization companies may not
I
discriminate.
do think the Civil Rights Bill was did that actually pass? I think it did.
I mean, we know the Equal Rights Amendment hasn't, right? Different things,
Right.
but that Kennedy had to say, okay, well, this restaurant is on an interstate, and therefore, okay, well, that state isn't going to require that restaurant to desegregate. This is literally how it happened, right? State isn't going to require that. The state legislature isn't going to require that restaurant to desegregate, and Congress may or may not, but probably can't pass a bill requiring it. So I'm going to say, well, it's on the interstate highway. That's federal jurisdiction. I can just executive order that, and the Supreme Court's permission to do that. But that's how it happened. That's how it had to happen. We're probably not much better in Canada, but at least we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms where we say that was a constitutional amendment. The last when the Queen came, did something parliamentary, she signed it herself. But yeah, it's again, what does it say about our society? Where, I mean, that's the thing people say about trans folks and queer folks. Like, what does it say about our society where we just don't accept people have the right to exist? Which
Okay.
to go there, I'm sorry to go there. That is, I know it's a heavily tribalized thing. With my day job, I gotta say this. That's what a lot of the pro-life folks say, right? So again, we kind of made all these things all or nothing, and that is, I understand some things are a matter of life and death, but a legislature gets so ineffective when nothing is acceptable, and that's again another part of the problem. And then
Well,
that is what
also
the Galactic Senate.
a legislature fails when we are no longer collective. Like, isn't that the idea of a legislature? Like, the collective comes together to make decisions.
Exactly.
And in a weird sense, the Republic
Mhm.
is sort of the kind of, I don't want to say it's like the leftist ideal per se, but it's certainly what kind of the idea of
Mhm.
like what a real leftist nation, or even what France was trying to go for
Mhm.
after the revolution, where it's like, okay, let's get rid of the all powerful king, get you out of here, Mr. Louis, and your
Yeah.
wife who eats the cake. We're gonna be a democracy, and the grand convention is gonna be, they're gonna
Mhm.
decide all the national stuff, with
Mhm.
the big decisions. Um, you know, that just in case we gotta go to war or something, you never know. Um, and everyone's gonna govern themselves in
Mhm.
committees and councils and very collective stuff, and we're all gonna vote on everything, and we're all gonna talk it out and whatnot.
Hmm.
Kind of the idea. Um,
Yeah.
that's the Senate. That's a collective body. It's not one. It's a bunch of people all together. Um,
But it's still a sense of a we.
it's there, but the we, and
You know.
then as society starts becoming less collective and whatnot, the Senate is like, "Oh, no, we don't want to make these decisions. Give it to this guy. Give it to this Palpatine
Yeah.
guy. He got a nice smile. He likes democracy. Just you can give him all the
He loves democracy.
right? I mean, that was the idea of the Clone
Yeah.
Wars and the
Yeah.
emergency powers, where it's
Yeah.
like the Senate can't decide this crisis. Just like the idea was like give Palpatine emergency powers, and he could just like snap his fingers. Clone army, here we go.
Mhm.
New fancy army, and then as the war kept going, um,
Mhm.
also, this is also maybe just a thing of like, this is what happens in crisis, and
Yeah.
when society's in crisis, this is kind of like make or break moment. Where it's like even even like in the Soviet Union, where it's like, remember, the
Mhm.
Soviet Union was born in a civil war. It wasn't just a revolution and then here's Stalin. It's a
Mhm.
revolution, civil war that was bloody as all heck. Kind
Mhm.
of ideas of like collective democracy. It's like, we're all dying here. Someone's got to make a
Mhm.
decision. Where to
Yeah.
send these troops.
So I mean, so was the Third Reich.
I started writing a
Was
little bit.
in this chaos of Weimar.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it. That's kind of my point. Is Lena So, she comes on the scene,
Mhm.
tapping into this sense of, the core, sure, but we're going out, we're expanding, we're a big family welcoming folks in. It is, if you want to talk about the leftist ideal, I mean, Charles Soule literally called it, he said it's Camelot, right? It's the Kennedys, their mission to say
Well,
America
I'd call
could
that the
be,
liberal ideal, not
yeah,
left.
the liberal ideal, right?
It's
Yeah,
Star
sure. It's
Trekky.
not, yeah, so that's true. Leftist, not liberal. There's two different things. But the center left ideal, there we go. The center left ideal of, she has this beacon which has all these different planetary biomes on it.
Mhm.
Everyone can go and exchange and whatnot. Even the Galactic Star Cruiser, the idea of that was at least the wealthiest folks can go and explore. I was just thinking about the other day. They had this moral rationale behind the Galactic Star Cruiser, the super expensive, super wealthy cruise thing, that even the real world was just too expensive for anyone to go on, and it tanked. There's a
Yeah.
topic for you. There's an allegory for you. But the idea of the in universe of whatever the ship and all that, and the cruise line, the Chandrila cruise line, was for people to expose themselves to other parts of the galaxy. I mean, that's the good side of tourism, if there can be a good side of tourism, and the good side of the internet, and the good side of all this stuff is so that we can broaden our horizons. And the idea for Lena So is, she says, okay, and I have this fair, this Republic Fair on Valo, that is going to have just have all these different delegations, kind of like the expos that would happen in Chicago and Montreal and New York and London and wherever, just exchange. And for Lena So especially, there was quite literally, she had the slogan of a sense of a we are all the Republic, right? We. And what the Nihil end up doing, and especially what the Clone Wars end up doing, is say not everybody wants to be part of that we, or that the we is fragile. And here's the thing, and that's the thing about a crisis, right? Is, I mean, it's created by that sense of we breaking down. And in the US right now, and I think in a lot of societies, and a lot of, in Canada too, I mean, like I mentioned, Alberta, right? I mean, maybe it's just this human nature to always want and feel the need for an us and a them, the need for us to say, I'm going to protect me and mine. Oh, look, you're a threat to me and mine. I mean, well, I guess Trump's saber rattling actually is a threat to Canadian sovereignty, but that's that's how with Weimar, right? It was such a divided society, and this is probably the closest parallel that George had at hand, I think. There, I mean, yeah, he had Nixon and all that, but Weimar was just, there was no sense of a we in Germany. It was just the wealthy and then the poor, and those who maybe look to the West for help, look to the West for like the League
Don't
of
forget
Nations,
being bitter about losing World War One.
and say, well, those who accepted loss of World War One, those who rejected it, and Hitler was saying, look at what the world is doing to us. I'm going to give you this sense of a we. Whatever we can say about fascism, it instills an incredibly strong sense of we for those it benefits. And that's the thing about an us and them. It actually does instill the sense of we, but for a smaller portion of a group, and it depends on pointing and saying us and not them, we and not they. And so again, with the Senate, the Galactic Senate, the tension, this Clone War, literally, I mean, it is a civil war. It's just never called that. It's called the Clone Wars. A very strong sense of we over and against the them of the Outer Rim, the separatists. And I mean, that's the thing. What the Empire is both a successor state to the Republic and a wiping the slate clean and starting anew with both Republic and separatist kind of, or at least saying it had the kind of reach that the Republic could never have. I mean, that's what the First Order was trying to do. So, yeah. So that, I mean, that's kind of the point of, without any sense of a we. And I mean, maybe the last point to say is, over the last few decades in our society, there are those who wanted to just expand that sense of we, to say women and people of color and queer folks are part of the we, are integral parts of the we, and that the we can change. We can change and look more representative versus, no, we've always known this white male patriarchal sense of identity. I mean, that's the thing. It's getting at those. We're not talking about legislatures anymore, but we're talking about who elects legislatures and what they're able to do, what's acceptable. And that is an interesting thought about Lina So here. There is a resonance with Palpatine. That is true. A little bit. I mean, talked about state building because it does end up in that. I mean, that's the thing with this whole sense of too much uniformity, too much unity ends up with too much uniformity. I mean, that's also with Leia and Mon Mothma, or not necessarily Mon Mothma, but the populists and the centralists in Bloodline, right? So,
Well,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's. I mean, I think senates are reflective of our society that we live in, and not necessarily inherently a problem on themselves. The individual. I mean, they have to be made up individuals. Someone has to seat them. If you get a Senate full of autocrats who from planets who are all pro empire, what are you gonna do? Which interesting is like, like if one of the things about the Republic Senate is like maybe they should be more picky of who they let in. Which is a whole other, which is kind of both kind of a dangerous topic, but also kind of one to think about. If you're just letting anybody and their mother in, then it gets, I don't want to don't want to get too nationalistic here, because that's definitely what people say. Like with the problem, like you're letting in the immigrants. But it's like if all your planets don't share the same values, what are we doing? Which is sort of an interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought, and like, talk about Lina So, Republics in crisis during the High Republic. Lina So's not asking for emergency powers. Lina So's not making a clone army. To be fair, Lina So's also not a cis. As far as
well, there's that.
No. But I'm kidding. But it's like the Republic's in a state of crisis in the High Republic, I think. But the way they're reacting to it is certainly a lot different than how politicians in the prequels are handling the Clone Wars. Granted, a lot of that is because also Palpatine's a Sith Lord who's actively trying to destroy the Republic from within, so that doesn't help.
But he had to have something to latch onto.
Yeah.
Right? That have a lever to pull, and that lever was this large-scale division and skepticism of the Outer Rim. How dare they change the status quo? Count Dooku was a visionary.
Yeah, and also, my guess is there. This is actually a weird thing that said in the Rise and Fall of Galactic Empire book, that the Senate weirdly both had the most idealistic senators in Padme, Mon, and Bail during that time, but probably also had a lot of people who were like cool with just centralizing power in the chancellorship this time around. And I don't know if again, Lisa So not even trying to do this, so she gets points for that. But if I wonder if how many people, honestly, this is where I wish we had more Senate scenes in the High Republic stories instead of just Jedi scenes. I want to focus on the Senate. That'd be more interesting for me.
Yeah.
Are there more senators who are like denial are crazy? We gotta make big decisions, concentrate power in the chancellorship now. Let's go.
Hmm.
Or would there have been way more pushback because the Senate still thinks of itself as the dominant force in the Republic? And I do kind of wonder where that kind of more. Let's just give it to the Chancellor already. Come on.
I mean, there's also a lot more trust in the Jedi to help handle things.
That too.
You know, I mean, the RDC. Well, not. I mean, another thing we're not getting at is, I mean, how representative are legislatures actually? Because that's the thing, right? You get, well, there's two problems there. One of the thing I'm raising is the problem of having different opinions, different perspectives in a body, and okay, are the procedures, are democratic procedures going to be the thing that enables societal change and healthier society? And that's the problem with the center left, the liberal perspective is traditionally it's just that too much open procedures, right, and rules, and saying it's a matter of rights, of negative rights, and not okay, what do we actually do with these things? So there's that problem. But also to say, kind of my point I was getting at before is, the whole question of how, like we raised this a few times, how do senators get elected? How do members of Congress in the U.S. get elected? What kind of PACs are funding them? When did Matt leave? And I say Matt leave, not just parental leave, but when was Matt leave instituted for members of Congress? And I say
technically we're not even supposed to have political parties. The founders did not want political parties.
But my point being, there's all these things that make it so difficult to get elected, and so limited. And it's not just the U.S., but George was specifically pointing out the power. I mean, giving the Kaminoans, giving the Trade Federation their Senate seats, giving the Trade Federation a Senate seat, which would never actually happen in the real world. But
not yet.
But I mean, of course, Tesla has an office in the White House. But get big. Actually, but it was the point of, that's the problem. If any member of Congress who goes against corporate interests, well, then they'll fund their opponent in a primary campaign or in the general or whatever. It's still the same here in our parliament. The similar question is why, that's my biggest beef with the Liberal Party of Canada, frankly, is probably my biggest beef is how it's not willing to, it claims to be a progressive-ish party, but never moving on electoral reform that Justin Trudeau promised, right? He said one of his first elections was like, this will be the last election at first past the post. And then he just said, oh no, that benefits us too much and not the NDP. And we won't have to be in a coalition. We could just get a majority. And so clearly, I mean, that's the thing. That's another barrier to folks who have a much clearer idea coming from these underrepresented communities, these communities that have been divided out from the we. They have a clear sense of what they need to be more included, right? I mean, and I brought up the Matt leave example as kind of almost a trivial one at this point, because of course there's parental leave and of course there's protections, but that's the thing. What kinds of other gender barriers are there? And again, that's why I brought it, because it's like it was one of those first barriers against women having these professional careers, was the expectation that they can't have a job because they have to go take care of the kids. Well, just say you do have to take care of the kids, can you also still have a job? I mean, that's why mat leave was so important. Now it's parental leave, the idea that child parenting is shared, all that. And so Yeah, I mean, so a legislature can only do what the society lets it, but it's also made up of well, this is the irony. This is the self-perpetuating irony. This is probably why a lot of legislatures end up concentrating power. Like with the electoral reform example, legislatures are only made up of the folks that legislatures allow to be made up of them. They're the ones who set the rules, right? And we, maybe we don't want the Supreme Court to be setting all these rules necessarily, but if there is, I mean, this was the Gene Roddenberry vision, right? If there were an objective standard that we could all agree on was good, then we'd actually do it and get it through, and the Galactic Senate would look more like the Assembly of the United Federation of Planets, right? Which that's the utopia, right? So, yeah.
Well, I think that's ultimately I think that's the thing is like maybe this is the hot take.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really what's written on the paper that matters. It's what's the national identity of your country / nation all about.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, like I was watching an interesting documentary a while ago, but not on my podcast about like outside maybe the UK and some Netherlands countries, Europe doesn't really have a very deep ideological rooted identity of democracy. Most of Eastern Europe has not been quote unquote a democracy for most of its life. You had Soviets, and before that you got all the empires. Russia for 1,000 years with the Tsardom, and then communist single party state, and now Putin. And it's sort of like, well, you could write down in the Constitution, hey, look, you got the presidency, you got the legislature, you got a court. If the Russian people are like, you don't care, yeah, whatever, yeah, sure, whatever, just Putin, do your thing. We've had Tsar forever. And the paper be damned.
I mean, he's definitely been. I mean, definitely a return of the Tsar, right? Return of the Tsar. There's a Star Wars film for you. No, I'm just kidding.
It's you had parliamentary monarchy, where the monarchs are kind of important. Got Japan's kind of made it, although I don't know, Japan's a weird one.
I mean, that's my point when I talk about King Charles being here, and our head of state's a guy who lives across the ocean, doesn't have any political power. The fact that he doesn't have any political power and is just entirely
the British monarchy actually is like on paper can be really powerful and could actually assert authority. They just don't choose to.
Well, no, because I mean that's the thing is, this is my point being the fact that the King of Canada has no actual political power in Canada was this long, millennium-long process, millennium-long struggle, right?
Right.
That said, it's completely unthinkable for like that. That's maybe what constitution means in a way, right? Is something that what is conceivable versus what is just inconceivable. Now, thankfully, it also helps that this bloke named Charles is quite a fan of democracy himself. Right? That does help a little bit, but he was raised to be, and he's part of a tradition that actually has developed this. And that's kind of your point of this cultural identity about democracy.
And I want to make clear, I'm not like poo-pooing other countries. I actually am kind of in this. I have like the controversial opinion of like, hey, you know what? Why should I impose my thoughts on other countries? Unless, like, I mean, to be fair, I mean, there are definitely probably some minorities in Russia that are not having a good time. Get out, or I hope one day that you get to have your.
I mean, that was the problem with both Bush and Obama trying to export democracy like this. I mean, that's the thing.
Let's export democracy to Iraq. That's going to work out.
It's a great thing, great thing to do, but it's just we think we can do it down the barrel of a gun too, which get back to the Clone Wars, right? The Republic thought that the Clone Army was defending democracy against this potential tyranny of a separatist alliance, whatever. Well, and it was an oligarchy, right? It was this financial power base and this
I
technological
just
power
thought it
base.
was a democracy, but it wasn't.
Well, that's the thing. They thought they were defending democracy
Yeah.
when they were actually propping up this authoritarianism there.
No, I'm talking about the separatists. I'm talking about like the separatists claim to be a democracy.
So they also, yeah, I mean, that's another wild thing that hasn't been explored at all. Right. And your point being Count Dooku being a visionary. And
There was a parliament. There was a separatist parliament.
Yeah. And I mean, Mina Monteri, if there were more separatists like Mina Monteri, no wonder her and Padme got along so well, right? They were two peas in a pod because they were both ardent, committed Democrats in the small d word. Yeah.
I got like two. First, I got this group. This is a good one.
Yeah, it's a great.
The British monarchy is painfully aware of how simple it would be for any Commonwealth country to republic if the monarchy actually exercised power against the will of the legislature.
Well,
so true.
I gotta say, I talked about that part of the world over there where you are, Joel. I mean, 1776 was a shock, and it was so shocking, frankly, that even just the hint, the little whiff that it might happen here in 1836 and 1837, there were like a band of angry drunks marching down with muskets and marching down the street, and they came up, marched down half an hour or whatever it is here in Toronto, in York, and that, oh, that's too much. We've got to actually look at ensuring self-government here. So yeah, I mean, and I think you're also talking about India, for example, is another example of just, again, where the norms, where even the crown or colonial power is doing something that shouldn't be thinkable, but turns out it has been doing this all this time. And you have someone like Gandhi, who is invigorating imagination about what ought to be thinkable and not. And so, I mean, there's even smaller things in Canada, like if you look up the King Byng affair, where the Governor General tried to make a kind of a ruling meddling into kind of an electoral situation, and that said, no, we got to clarify these rules. Is a very small, and this is a tangent here, of course, but there's a very small little window where the crown actually can make a decision about some things, like if, when, well, here, this is an interesting thing about an unwritten constitution, right, and norms. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was a conservative minority, but Liberals and NDP held the balance of power. And they said, this was during Stephen Harper, the Liberal NDP leader said, well, we could actually have a coalition government. And so Prime Minister Stephen Harper, he said, no, this is a coup. They're going against the Constitution, going against the norms, because apparently a coalition government is unthinkable in Canada. It's kind of against the Constitution. That if the Governor General at the time had actually allowed it, then yeah, it would have been legal. It would have been part of the Constitution. It's not illegal, right? No one would get charged or anything, and the Supreme Court wouldn't have said anything. But Harper was able to say, this just isn't done here, and he prorogued Parliament instead, and then there was an election. But it's just, this is to your point, right? It's never just the procedures. It's always what the people do with those procedures and why. And that's the thing, the most democratic thing is for us to say, we want our elected representatives to use those procedures for the well-being of everyone, or for the well-being of my interests or whatnot, and that's the discussion. That's the divide.
So I have like kind of two more points to make. One kind of a based off what you're saying, and then kind
Yeah.
of a very optimistic note to end on.
Yeah.
Actually,
Good.
no, I think it's legit. I actually think I might
Yeah.
got something. You
Mhm.
know, obviously you said never got in trouble with the breaking norms, but I do think that, you know, I think we have, you know, I think even people who are all about the procedures and stuff,
Mhm.
especially on the liberal side, leftists are always willing to do this, could we? But on the liberal side, especially, I
Mhm.
think, and this is something maybe you could argue, maybe Mon Mothma failed at, quote unquote. I don't know. You
Mhm.
can. This is the question mark of, you need to get more okay with punishing people for breaking the norms. If your system is all
Mhm.
based off norms,
Mhm.
which I think America's system is a little too much based on norms. I think we have a little too much unwritten stuff, and a little bit too
Well,
much like,
and Trump
uh,
is pushing the bounds of it, right?
right. Well, you know, if
Just
he
what is it?
loses, I think you gotta punish people for breaking norms, and if
Yeah.
that means long jail time, then so be it. Right? Like if
Mm.
Palpatine, you know, if Palpatine was alive, you it's like gets a slap on the wrist and like, okay, go back to Naboo, retire. No, he'd be in jail.
Right.
In a cis-proof prison of magic and
I
whatnot.
mean, Trump
But
should have been impeached, right? Or he was, you know, and then, I mean, that's the equivalent, I guess, of what you're getting at here.
well, impeachment does not mean getting removed from office.
Sorry, he should have been removed. He should have, but the Republicans in the Senate said no. Like there was
Right.
the impeachment. You're right. There, and yeah, I know the difference, but
You
that
know, if
should have gone. You should have been held. I mean, well, your point being, if a legislature cares about its job seriously, it'll hold the executive accountable.
or you know, even if the opposition party wins,
Yeah.
you know, there's still a lot of people who wish the Bush who Dick Cheney was behind bars, and Bush, and Rumsfeld, and pretty much everybody in the
Hmm.
Bush administration. Um,
I mean that sets the precedent for what Trump wants to do. You know,
but is
lock
it
him up
wrong?
Hillary.
Is it wrong?
I mean that's the question of norms, right? That's the
Should I
question
give
of.
if Mon Mothma had Grand Admiral Thrawn, Darth Vader, and Palpatine? What's she gonna do with them?
I mean,
And Tarkin and Krennic.
so like what would Bush and Rumsfeld then be in prison for war crimes in Iraq or?
War crimes, national security stuff, wiretapping, the torture.
Yeah, I see your point. Again, it's a slippery slope to a dark place. The sign of thought will carry us.
True, but then they
I do
can't.
know. I do see what you mean, though.
But then look at what happened in New Republic. The First Order came back in Kabumi.
Yeah, no, I do see what you mean. Um, right, and maybe that's partly what. I mean, yeah, maybe that's partly what Trump is exploiting. Right, is this lack of accountability. I mean, he even used the presidential seal at what an NRA rally or something like that. I mean, he's just. I mean, he's crossing lines left, right, with the Qatar plane thing, right? Crossing the left, right, and center. Please let me back into your country in July. I keep saying that, but
Well, I mean, I think you
yeah.
should do that. I think you should. I think, you know. So, what do you think? If Mon Mothma shouldn't have arrested Tarkin from prison?
No, I do get what you're saying, but you get why I'm hesitant.
True, but then they just come back to office later because the people are like, I like this Tarkin guy again.
Yeah, I mean, then there's someone who gets released from jail, and it makes things more more
Not expensive.
polarized and more animosity. I get what you mean. I get what you mean. Do you get why I'm hesitant, right? We don't want to say political enemies get locked up.
But
Right.
but that's why they're political enemies, and they're enemies.
No, but they're not locked up because they're political enemies. They're locked up because they've committed crimes against society.
Well, then that's what you do. You know, you punish a kid for.
You know, I get your point. I do get your point. But to a dark place, this line of thought will carry us, right?
True, but maybe we need to go there. We need to go some dark places.
I mean, what I do think. Here's what I do think is, I thought of this, and here we go. Finally bringing this up this week. I haven't brought up this one up yet. Where are you? I do think there's going to be a major reckoning with the religious right. I think a lot of, and this is me. This is actually I find this sad. a lot of Christianity in the U.S. is headed for, like, a lot of more evangelical Christianity might be headed for a major collapse.
I think it's already collapsing, for what I've heard.
So mainline Protestantism that I'm a part of, that's definitely collapsed. Past tense, right? We're not gonna go defunct, but we're not what we were. The Episcopal Church, Sophie's Church, they have to, they did a massive budget slashing and employee slashing and all that, and they're doing creative reimagining of how they organize themselves, and there's opportunities there. But I think what is going to happen is maybe a not so quiet revolution, that later generations are going to look back and say, oh, this was supported by a brand of Christianity. I know a lot of folks are saying, oh, that's not really Christianity, but that's a hard sell. And a lot of folks, and there's definitely the deconstruction movement and the sort of reckoning with this deeply held idea of Christianity and American identity. And that, I mean, that's in a way, I mean, Trump represents the last gasp of holding on to this fusion that is starting to come apart, that has in a lot of places come apart. And in this reassertion of it, attempt to reassert it, that's what they mean by making America great again, is making it this white patriarchal Protestantism again, right? Because they think the two are, so that the rejection of white patriarchal Protestantism, or the rejection of white patriarchy, and the rejection of Protestantism, the rejection of Christianity, are going to go hand in hand in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. And I mean, that being said, younger generations that are that voted for Trump, who are kind of atheist tech bros, that might put a lie to what I'm saying. But I think for a large segments of society, it's happening already, even more so. So I think that kind of accountability on a larger scale, to the point where, I mean, that's the weird thing, right? They're crying persecution. They're crying persecution. What if a lot of things end up being illegal because they smack of Trump, right? What if a lot of things that publicly that even I want to be able to do, like, what if? Just what if? And I'm saying this is, I don't know if this is possible at all. Probably isn't. What if there's a context where I'm not allowed to talk about Christianity on my Star Wars podcast because it's too close to what Trump was doing, right? What if? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm saying that kind of accountability. I'm not, obviously that's crazy. and I have rights in Canada, but I can see, and I'm not, here's the wild thing, I'm not saying that's entirely a bad thing. To agree with your point, ultimately, I'm not saying it's entirely a bad thing for this whole.
Well, there are democracies that have those strict rules, like in Germany, you can't say nice things about the Nazis.
Yeah.
You can't say the Holocaust didn't happen without getting fined. I think at least fined, maybe arrested, but at least definitely.
And there's a political party that Elon Musk supports that is trying to change that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good example. I mean, Quebec, interestingly, has gone too far in that direction, right? I mean, where you can't, like, government employees, Quebec government employees, can't wear a cross necklace, and they can't wear a hijab, and different things, right? Like that, like it's an equal opportunity discrimination there. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the Quiet Revolution, right? That's the foretaste, that the Catholic Church had so much power in Quebec and was very conservative in Quebec, that as Quebec as a society definitely went in a very progressive direction as part of their national identity. That's the wild thing. When their national identity, as their distinct national identity, was uncoupled from their distinct religious identity, and it was then they rejected the religious identity, and went for a more left wing, secular, I mean, very European French style secular political identity that now has gone this other direction of saying, you know, you can't wear, can't be a government employee and wear a hijab, which is, I mean, that went to the Supreme Court for sure. And
I can imagine.
yeah.
I mean, it's a thin line, right? I think of
Mhm.
not democracy, but I used to think of like old school, like in Syria, for instance, the former
Mhm.
government was secular, and one
Yeah.
of their big things is like Syria's actually a pretty conservative country. Minus, I mean, like cities were probably more secular, but the large country, parts of
Yeah.
the countryside in the cities were
Mhm.
quite conservative religion. But they
Yeah.
put that down because it was their major political opposition for the
Well, there's that.
secular
Yeah.
government. So if you wore a hijab in Syria in your side, like you were kept an eye out by the secret police. And that's why the
Mhm.
government that took over now is very religious Sunni. Because they're
Yeah.
technically majority. So it's definitely. I mean, that's a hard case, but it's certainly a thin
Yeah.
line. Oh, I actually got some good comments, by the way.
Mhm.
Uh, we actually have a political flashpoint here right now due to a breach in norms where the
Right.
Hakka in Parliament protest government treaty bill. Now these members face punishment over it.
Yeah. I
It's
saw
the
that.
government using power to. Yeah, I mean it's true, but
Yeah.
I mean but it's a kind of a question of like if
Mhm.
Palpatine had lived and got caught by
Yeah.
Mon Mothma, probably he goes to trial and he goes to jail or what they did with the Nazi regime in World
Is
War
he
II.
too dangerous to be kept alive? I mean, that's the Mace Windu thing. I'm against capital punishment. Is probably too dangerous to be kept alive.
Yeah,
Um,
to be fair, this is a fictional character who shoots lightning out of his hand. But it's sort of the well. I mean, here's actually, World War II again. Look
yeah.
at the Nuremberg, not the
Yeah.
Nuremberg, the beer hall putsch in
Yeah.
1923. What
Mhm.
did who do? He tried to overthrow the government, and what the German government do is like, you get like a year in a minimum security cell, and you
Yeah.
get a nice book deal. Here you go.
I mean, the January 6th terrorist attack, they need to be, you know, and I mean that would have been grounds probably for inciting that for Trump. But you're right. I mean, that's the thing. The fact that those weren't prosecuted adequately. Some were, I think, but
Somewhere, and some went to jail. But it's
yeah.
like the people who ran it probably were, but like the nobodies who
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
Guy who wore
Oh,
the silly hat. So
yeah.
that's a sort of thing. I don't know why I don't know how this has things to do with the Senate.
I mean, well, because it has to do with the power of the
Yeah.
legislature to check executive overreach, right?
Mm.
And the inability of legislatures to do that adequately.
I
Um,
mean, should the new Republic Senate have gone harder, like ban imperial logos? I mean, I guess they did. They banned stormtroopers.
yeah,
Ban any pro-imperial sentiments
yeah.
in the galaxy. You're part of the Republic. You can't have pro-imperial sentiments. Get that stuff out of here.
But then Ransom Castervo has this collection. Like he would
Yeah.
have had this scarf, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I guess they're gonna go after Thrawn, or at least Akbar is. So that's nice.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's raises another kind of story thing of,
mm,
I kind of wish Ben Solo had survived, so we would have had some sort of story about that, because we still haven't had a villain gets captured and has to atone.
or I mean,
You
to
know?
be fair, I think Ben Solo would be more. I actually want to see the opposite. I want to see a villain get captured, but not atone. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
what if Thrawn got captured? I don't think he's
Right.
gonna atone. I bet Filoni's writing him.
Right.
Or if Tarkin had gotten captured,
If Zahn had written him,
yeah,
then
okay,
he'd atone.
you atone, and then the Republic and the Chips would team up, and it'd be a whole
Yeah.
thing. Or if like let's do Tarkin. Tarkin's more
Yeah.
Tarkin had gotten captured. You think he's atoning? You think he feels bad about the Death
Yeah.
Star? Probably not. I mean,
Mhm.
Palpatine, obviously, again, if he gotten captured,
Mhm.
do you keep him alive? There's a dark question.
Well,
Uh,
that's my question. Yeah, like is he too dangerous?
right.
Again, it's that's my thing. It's a fictional story. That's
If
your point.
Marcion Rowe gets captured,
We could still get it. Come on, Charles.
mm,
I know you're thinking it.
what do you do with Marcion? If he doesn't want to atone, you just like lock him up and throw away the key? I'm gonna do one tangent. I'm sorry. I have this tangent. Now this is the perfect time. I wish Acolyte had gotten to season 2 because I had like this really fan servicey thing where like, what if Marcion Rowe had gotten captured and then it's like, we need help. I know one person. We go to a jail and it's old Marcion Rowe. He's all
That'd be
like
oh my
all
gosh.
Hannibal Lecterish, and he's like, the Jedi still suck after 100 years. I'm felt finessed captured the Sith Lord.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think the closest we've gotten, we're getting at least is Aslan Rel.
That is true. Although he's
Yeah. I mean, because he's there. He's still, it's a long
there.
internal process. Yeah. I mean, something like Ben or Anakin.
Or Hux. Hux would have been fun to have to get captured and then
Yeah.
just,
But like someone who we see turn, like Ben or Anakin, right?
Right. I get the question of someone who doesn't turn. And
Yeah.
it's like, would have gotten getting captured like Hux. Like Hux wouldn't have turned. He still probably would hate the Republic. He just doesn't like Kylo Ren. He's probably like, I love the First Order. It's just
have we gotten something like that in maybe Marvel or DC or? I'm trying to think.
Nah, because Red Skull's dead. No, Red Skull's a zombie now.
Bucky, I guess. Winter Soldier? No, not really.
No. He was mind control. Baron Zemo. Well, Baron Zemo is also weird.
Yeah.
I guess Wilson Fisk from Daredevil, who went to jail, then got dead. Now is the mayor of New York.
I still haven't seen that show. I need to see that.
But that's not a spoiler because that's part of the premise. Is Wilson Fisk, mob boss? Now he's the mayor of New York City. Yeah. You can imagine how that's going.
Yeah, I don't think that's a redeemed story.
No, that's what's going to happen in New York in a couple of days, weeks.
Oh, that's right. The election's coming up.
Yeah. Okay. I'll wrap up with just kind of a more positive note.
Yes.
Because to go back to what we talked about, tradition, the ideology of a nation, the how deeply rooted are these ideas of democracy, freedom in a country or a nation, whatever you want to call it. The republics had been the galaxy and the Galactic Republic existed for 1,000 years, maybe 25,000, depending on how long you want to take into account what they ever do with the Old Republic and how that works out. That's a long time. It's a very long time. We have, and with alien creatures who are in the Republic, we probably have people who have witnessed hundreds of years of the Galactic Republic's history.
True.
The Empire only lasted for 25 years and then collapsed. And we're talking canon time.
Right.
Sure, and then it had like 1 year of First Orderness before that went away. So, that being said, there's a little bit of optimism of that maybe even for a couple of relapses of crisis, the galaxy hopefully has a very deeply rooted democratic idea. There are people there were many people who remember the Republic under the Empire. There were still generations of people who remembered what it was like and didn't forget. And then the Empire went away. It didn't even last 30 years. That is my one optimistic take of why I'm not as confident that who is going to become American Führer for life. I mean, that he's in his 70s, entering his 80s, and he's not in a good health. He ain't gonna be lasting that long, regardless. And I don't think any of his acolytes are even that fraction of his dark charisma to be clever.
They'll all collapse once.
Pretty much.
Shatter.
Pretty much. So even if we get a minor Bonapartist era moment, no, we've had 200 years. So the last 10, 20, that's still drop in the bucket. Heck, even Rome, if Augustus had died, it could have gone back to the Republic at some point. It didn't, but that's a whole other story. But my point is, if you want to, the weird thing about Star Wars is most of its history has been the Senate and the thousands of years of wise rule.
True.
And the Empire only lasted for 30. So Palpatine, for all his machinations, his stamp on the galaxy is a dark one indeed. But I don't think he truly killed the deep rootedness of the galactic democratic spirit. And that's my weirdly optimistic take on Star Wars.
Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause. If I can keep going here, that like tyranny is so unnatural, it requires constant vigilance to maintain, whereas freedom is so natural that it will spring up. People will keep pushing for their voice because that's also part of human nature. Yeah, I mean, again, that's the nice thing about the U.S. Constitution. It's 4 years, 4 years. Yeah, and yeah, it's true. We will live to see a day beyond the present darkness. That is true too. So Star Wars is all about hope. It's all about these stories, folks enlisting in the cause, including senators, including Jedi who return and then lead on forward. So yeah, that's definitely a good point to leave off. That freedom is a pure idea and it occurs spontaneously. So we got to keep fostering that. But all right, that's a great point to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for giving us our Southern Hemisphere perspective there, Daisy, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us in the comments. Let us know what you thought of our conversation. I know we kind of went all over the place, different tangents and whatnot, but that's how we do at the Eye on Canon podcast. To let us know what you think. If you've seen Rogue One after Andor, if that changes things for you, an ESP in concert or Star Wars in concert. I know there was another one our friend Jeff went to, Force Awakens. Yeah. So that's a great experience there. Tolkien-esque power scaling and Palpatine being a politician. What do you think of that? Let me know. And then let us know. And then I'll think about Guardian Protocols next week, a little more of that. But yeah, for now, let's wrap it up. So you do comment below. Comment boxes ain't going anywhere. Socials ain't going anywhere. So yeah, please do give this video a like and a share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, again, another great poli-sci heavy deep dive. We went in all sorts of wonderful directions. Why not? Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID20234 on Blue Sky, JID20234 on Blue Sky, on Star Wars Underworld Discord under my name, and of course at the Eye on Canon podcast, EYECANON at Blue Sky.
Yeah. We're just Eye on Canon on Blue Sky.
Yes. That was a good discussion. I think we covered Fall of the Senate. I think enough.
Got there. I mean, again, it wasn't just internal things; it was everything around it, right? So you can find me kind of probably not tweeting about political opinions very much on Twitter at AG485. I got to post an ice cream photo on Instagram at beaches.foodie tonight. I will do that, but also put selfies of me, including selfie of my my time at Roy Thompson Hall in Toronto. Empire Strikes Back at Instagram at MNEUG1138. You all know what I look like if you're watching on video, but otherwise check that out. And it's also Blue Sky and Threads, MNEUG1138. Of course, check out at the SWU on the tractor beam this Wednesday. Joel, you're hopping on. We're talking about Legacy of Vader #4 and Rise of Skywalker #4. Speaking of Ben Solo, speaking of Kylo Ren, so check that out. And of course, next week we are talking all about the 5 most important historical moments in Star Wars. We're doing a top 5 list again. Hopefully, a fun discussion, interesting, like in universe, the top 5 in universe events in canon or
we're doing the whole 25,000 years history, folks.
Yes. So. It'll probably be skewed towards a certain period of time, but because it's what we know. But yeah, check out that episode. Same bat time, same not bat. There's no bats in Star Wars. Same Gundark time, same Gundark channel. Here, Underworld YouTube channel, 5:30 p.m. Pacific night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and of course Tractor Ream this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. But yeah, until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.